top-down vote to decide nationally which bases should be closed and which shouldn't be closed, because they could not do it one at a time. And it actually worked and saved the federal budget and the defense budget billions of dollars. I thought, why can't we do something similar when it comes to the siting question with homelessness? In January, I asked my colleagues to commit to a master siting plan for Sacramento. And the idea was, and the idea remains as follows. The council has shown great leadership, all of my colleagues, in going out to their community, holding meetings, identifying sites, and bringing forward those sites so that we could compile them citywide, put them in a single report, in a single plan, in a single resolution, take one vote, and that one vote will be next Tuesday, August the 10th. Once that vote is taken, all of the sites in the plan will be deemed approved. My intent is to say that after the 10th of August and the approval of this master siting plan, that neither the city management nor anybody responsible for the implementation of this plan has to come back to the city council for any other approvals. Should all be about implementation. So what are we presenting here today after that maybe too lengthy introduction? The plan we bring forward next Tuesday includes 20 sites in Tier 1. 15 of them publicly owned or controlled sites. We add those 20 new sites to the existing new facilities that are still, some which are still in construction, like the WX Sprung Shelter. We are going to create annual capacity with just the new sites, for over 3,600 people. When we add the existing new facilities, like the WX shelter, we will add another 1,000 plus people that we will be able to help. Bottom line, because I want to get you to the bottom line. When we take the 20 sites, we add them to the new facilities that have already been approved, that we are either creating or have just been created. When we add a placeholder for a large campus, and while I'm not able to report to you with specificity a location and a site at this point, I will tell you we are making great progress in identifying a potential site for a large campus facility, in collaboration, by the way, with our county partners. When we add these 20 priority sites, existing new facilities, a large campus, a commitment to 6 motel conversions within the city, in addition, using our motel voucher program, our housing voucher program, and a scattered site approach, we believe that we can intervene with 9,820 people in a single year. That means helping almost 10,000 people begin ending their state of homelessness if we implement this plan with the same urgency, with the same passion, with the same fidelity that has gone into my colleagues and the community and my team developing this plan and bringing it forward for a vote next Tuesday. I'm glad to answer your questions in any detail about the various elements, but just to explain once again, there are really 2 main parts of this. One is a siting plan where we identify 20 new sites, 15 of them which are publicly owned, which will allow us to construct safe ground, tiny home villages, congregate shelter, even permanent supportive housing on these sites. because we will either control the sites or we already have agreements with the private property owners to go forward with a specific project. In addition to those new sites, we have a number of projects that have already been approved that we are moving forward with, like the WX shelter. Third, we are committed with our county partners to create the space for a large campus for people who are the most chronically homeless, who are dealing with the most significant mental health and or substance abuse issues. In addition, we are going to be aggressive, especially with the state funding under Project Home Key, to seek to convert at least 6 new motels, if not more, so that we can use the motel conversion strategy as a key part of bringing people indoors. And by the way, the advantage to Project Home Key is that we will own the assets and the motels for the long term. That gets us with the program assumes that for all the temporary sites, we're going to be able to move people through on an average every 6 months. Now that's an average, because some people, once we get them into safe ground, into a tiny home village, in a temporary shelter or housing, will be able to reconnect and reunite with family or friends and end their homelessness quickly. For others, we know it will be much more difficult. But we assume an average of a flow through every 6 months to get to our 9,800 plus number. If you assume no flow, that everybody stays in the temporary shelters and the temporary safe grounds and never leave, we still are able to accommodate over 5,300 people. How are we going to pay for this? One of the appendixes to the report shows how, as a city, I will propose that we get to a new investment of $100 million, $100 million, and we can do it between our American Relief Plan Act dollars, our new state dollars through so-called HAP 3, through some of the other available federal funds. We can get to $100 million. And I will not presume to, and I did not speak in any way for the county. I will tell you that I am more encouraged than ever about our conversations together, about our relationship, and about our partnership. And we are meeting regularly to talk about how we can partner in very specific ways to not only maximize our resources, but to play to our strengths. We'll operate, we'll fund most of these sites. We obviously don't do mental health and or substance abuse, and it's where we need that partnership with the county. The report also includes mandatory good neighbor requirements. And this is again where Bob and John and Steve Waters are going to talk to you in just a moment about good neighbor policies. Start with the quality of the projects, but aren't limited just to the quality of the projects. Every project and every provider and operator is going to sign a good neighbor policy so that there is a requirement that the facilities that we build, the sites that we activate, are a net benefit to the neighborhood, not a negative. And for those, and I know they're out there saying, well, please do this, but don't put this anywhere near I live or where my business is. Doing nothing is not an alternative. It's not an alternative. Because if we don't do what I am putting forward here, then we are left with the status quo, with what people see every day under the freeway, what they see spreading throughout our city. It's not a unique Sacramento problem. It's a state and national problem. But I've said it before, and I still believe it. We have an opportunity to show, not that we can cure the problem, because nobody's promising a cure, but that we can make it better, that we can show people a tangible and visible difference while we help thousands of people along the way. Let me turn it over again to John and to Bob for a few minutes to show you our concept of what safe ground could look like in Sacramento, so that people begin seeing we're not talking about squalid tent encampments. We want people to have a path out of homelessness, to live safer, to live in a more healthy way, and to live with dignity. And I'm grateful to AIA and First Step Communities for helping to show us the way. John? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is John Hodgson. I have a real estate development company here in Sacramento, the Hodgson Company. I'm really here today as a volunteer on behalf of the organization that's been involved in this, primarily the Urban Land Institute, Sacramento District Council, and Bob Chase, who is with ULA also. He's a private sector architect currently, and will introduce himself shortly. Also with me, and you'll hear, is Steve Waters. Steve is the executive director of the First Step Communities. They're the group that we have partnered with in terms of when we came up with designs, we work with them. Very simplistically, a couple, 3 months ago, Bob and I were saying the design of the housing that needs to be provided needs to be much better than it is right now. So we reached out to several architect firms here in town, including Modular Architects, Dreyfus and Blackford, and the DLR Group. All of whom are well-regarded architectural firms. They, like us, volunteered our time to come up with some designs. We were not asked by anybody. We just felt it was the right thing to do and consistent with some of our national and other regional efforts. Bob will talk in shortly about the designs. We have hard copies of everything. You're welcome to take them. And right now I want to introduce, though, Steve Waters, who will talk about some of the programs that need to be implemented consistent with the housing designs that we've come up with in a way that makes sense, and not simply just propose some designs. Steve?
Hello, again, my name is Steve Waters. I'm the director of First Step Communities. Are we viewing the slides currently?
Right now.
Okay, can we go to the vision slide, please? Couple of slides in. Actually, back up a couple. One more. There you are. Just want to mention that the vision that we brought to this is that we want to provide more than shelter. Shelter is, of course, the #1 requirement, shelter and safety, but we want to provide support and the necessary environment to help people move forward towards good outcomes. Okay, next slide. Just a few comments there that pass on to you. We're trying to help people improve in all these areas: their self-sufficiency, independence, inherent worth, fulfillment, and quality of life. Okay. Our job as part of this team was to talk about what are some of the components, design components of a successful community. We know these clients. We've worked with low barrier shelters, low barrier cabin programs, and we run the current safe grounds that are out there. So we have a pretty good idea on this. And I won't go back over all those components I've listed there, but I want to mention that our #1 concern first is safety. We want to provide a safe environment for all people. We want to give them an environment with services that will help them move towards stabilizing their lives and moving towards successful outcomes. And finally, We want to give them opportunities for growth. Okay, on the second part of that last slide, one of the things that we're proposing in some of these communities is that we provide some type of cohort grouping where we can provide specialized employees with special skill sets that can help different groups of people as they work together towards some goals that are individual, but that they can share mutually. So we want to design for success in how we organize these communities regardless of size. They're scalable. We want to build these cohort groups and have the specialized employees. Okay. And then one more slide here. Just a little bit more about those cohort groups. As you can see, we would design different tracks for different groups of individuals experiencing homelessness. And the tracks would be designed to help them work together to stabilize their environment towards bringing growth to their individual plan, developing individual exit strategies. What is success to each individual and how do we move them on? And of course, the ultimate goal, which may have a lot of steps leading up to it, is to get them to permanent housing. These are the things that we tried to bring to this team to help design communities that could be very successful for the city and all of our communities. So I'm going to pass it now to Bob and let him tell you about some of the designs that we came up with.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. My name is Bob Chase. I'm a licensed architect in California. Number of hats over the years. I've done a lot of affordable housing in Southern California and Northern California. After private sector work, I actually served as the chief building official for the city of Sacramento. Following that, I was appointed by Governor Brown as deputy state architect. And since then, have been working with John and ULI and the AIA in looking at how do we solve our homeless issues here, at least try to address them. To that end, we brought in 3 teams. Again, as John mentioned, this has all been pro bono, voluntary, by architects who I think feel as passionate as John and I do about needing, and the mayor, about needing to do something about this issue. We tasked them each with 3 different ideas to take a look at, and we'll go through those, and each firm looked at that. There's a kind of a campsite supportive housing. The idea here is that this could be the most quickly deployed approach. B is it's hard for me to read it, but kind of a tiny home approach up there. And then C is a combination of these. Next, Andrew. Thank you. The first one, which is the campsite supportive housing, the intent here is that these are essentially, we call them tent sites, but they're not the typical REI tents. Not that REI does not have great tents available, but they'll have more of a sense of permanence but also be able to be deployed and moved fairly easily from one site to another as the needs shift around the city. They will be constructed fairly easily, fairly quickly, locally. And this could be the first grouping that could go out there, although it's all site specific and open to what sites the mayor first indicates are the active ones. The key here, I think, in all of this, and Steve touched on, as did John, we need to do more than just throw a series of tents out on a site. It has to have a sense of dignity to it, offer a sense of community, respect for the people who are coming in to live here, and also provide the services that Steve Waters that we know is needed in these campsites. So, Andrew, next one. This first, as I say, this is still the first site, and this one was developed by Dreyfus and Blackford. Would be the tent structures, but the key you'll see through all of these is that there's going to be a common areas of gathering spaces, things that have a social character to them. So again, people are not just living, going out to an anonymous tent somewhere out in the middle of the field. It has to be much more than that. Next. You can see up in the upper left the kind of structure, tent configuration that would house a person in here. One of the things we've realized too in these is that there needs to be a sense of storage. I think we've all seen the campsites and the rivers and everything. There's a lot of stuff that people have, and that needs to be respected and accounted for. So in all of these cases, we're looking at providing facilities for that. Next. Kind of an aerial view of what one of these clusters could look like. And I think as you see, what you'll see there is a grouping of villages. And these would break this down into a comfortable social grouping of people rather than just being anonymous, a group out there. So, and this has been with the help of Steve, but each of the architectural teams have worked closely with
I'm
him.
interrupting you. That is the picture. That's the visual. That's what we want for these safe grounds, okay? That's what we want.
And we agree with that. We support that. Thank you. As you can see, these are a little bit different than some of the sites that you do see around the area right now. Granted, those had to be put up pretty quickly, but this is the type of thing that we want to see happen here. There will be spaces for parking for residents. Some people have cars, staff have cars. There needs to be social areas, gathering spots, facilities, toilet facilities, shower facilities, areas for eating, whether the food is brought in or cooked on site. These will all be site specific depending on where we're looking at. Next, Andrew. Again, a look at how these things would be put together. A little hard to see on the left, but those are the components that would go into assembling these things. Fairly, the idea is that they're affordable, easily established. We're working with a local fabric campus company in the city. This architectural firm is to develop these. And as I say, these would be easily deployable. They have a rigid floor once they're on site. As should the needs change, they can be picked up and moved very easily to another location. Next. The second group, this was a Modular Architects. A lot of you may know their firm. They've done a lot of affordable housing through the city. They've taken a look at possible tiny homes scenario. Next. And what they're looking at is a way to combine a number of these tiny homes into single units, similar to some of the classrooms that you see schools using and modular homes. The intent being that these would be 10 feet wide, 40 feet long, meaning they are transferable on trucks, trailers, standard sizes. And each one of these modules can house 4 people. They can then be combined in a number of different ways. Next. As you can see on the kind of the bottom right, there's different ways of configuring these and locating them. And you can see how they can be hauled up above there. The left, I won't go down into the detail, but it's a kind of detailed look at how these would be assembled and put together. Next. And this is one of 2 approaches of how these might be assembled in the field and provide, again, gathering and social spaces in addition to the living area. Next. A different approach where there are little villages and common areas supporting, a number of, back to Steve's comment about there needs to be social groupings that are manageable, that people can relate to, not, sitting in the middle of 500 people and not knowing who's there. Next. And the third group, this was by the DLR group, again, as I think John mentioned, a national architectural firm. These are the folks that we started talking with in Los Angeles 3 years ago in efforts down there that unfortunately did not get very far, partially because there was no funding, as the mayor mentioned. That has changed now. DLR has taken a look at a hybrid site here of how we can use different components and put them all, all together. Next. This is a typical site plan, and this is on a roughly, I think, an acre. I forget the number, but this is what could go on there. And I think we could get probably 150 people, which, as Steve has said, is about the max you want for a social grouping. This could be a combination of, in the upper right, you can see that large structure. That could likely be a sprung structure. They are, very good units for what they are for. We don't want them scattered throughout residential neighborhoods, I think, throughout the city. However, they do serve a purpose. This would be one of those that would be probably housing the most critically needed residents who have more crisis and intervention issues that Steve's support facilities could handle if they're in that large facility. They would then eventually move out into either the tiny homes or the tent structures to the left. I think the key you'll see here and the next slides will probably show this a little bit better there needs to be social spaces. This is the inside of what this sprung structure could look like that could serve, again, beds, but also central dining, could have kitchen facilities, a lot of flexibility in what these would offer. Next. And there's, again, another image of what one of these could look like. And I think this goes to the mayor's comment on the last grouping. We want to provide something that is going to be acceptable, attractive, and fit in, respect the folks who are going to be in here, but also respect the neighbors and the communities where these are going to be placed. The intent here is that they will all have a social space for the residents in there. Perhaps a dog park that could be a combination of, the neighbors and the residents here, of course, depending on the types of dogs that folks have. But the idea is that the central buildings that would provide administration, other functions, could be similar to portable classrooms, again, brought onto site, and that combined with the sprung structure and the tent or tiny homes. The intent with this whole approach is that we wanted to come up with essentially a menu of parts, pieces that could be provided and combined in a number of ways on sites of different sizes. And I think that there may be a few more images, Andrew, if we can. Again, just an idea of what some of these social spaces could look like. To us, these are very critical, and I think Steve will support that as well. We've got to have something for people to gather in. And that gives you a sense of what it is, and we'd be glad to answer any questions about that.
Thank you. Let me, if I may. Let me, first of all, thank the three of you again, because this is as important as anything. Because we are trying to show the community and prove to the community that we can lead with big hearts, help thousands of people, and at the same time do it in a way that is respectful to our neighborhoods, to our business corridors. This is not either or. I always say this in politics because I think politics in this modern era, everything's, you're either this or you're that. We can lead with a big heart. We can help thousands. We can help over 9,000 people a year. And at the same time, we can have a cleaner and a safer city. I want to again thank my colleagues before I open it up for questions because they really led on this. This master plan is the product of dozens of community meetings. So you say, God, where do these sites come from? Does the community know about this? You better believe they know about it because they've been involved in dozens of meetings. Thousands of people have attended. I want to thank my colleagues for leading. Tuesday is a historic moment, a potentially historic moment for the city of Sacramento. I do not know of another community that is taking one up or down vote and approving multiple sites at one time. The intent here, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that once this vote is taken and when it passes, everything after that should be self-executed. Self-executed. We are going to delegate to our expert city team the ability to prioritize the 20 sites. And by the way, there are 19 additional sites in tier 2 that could be put on the plan once the respective council member perfects a lease agreement or a sale agreement with the property owners that they are talking to. Those are mostly private property sites. Once the plan is approved, the city manager and his team will be delegated the ability to take the $100 million or so to prioritize which sites we can get up quickest, to match the program provider, the architecture, the site, and the resources, and to go without having to come back to the city council. The community is so tired of process. Some process is important. Everything we did leading up to Tuesday's vote has been vital to gain the buy-in of the community, to gain the buy-in of my colleagues, to gain the buy-in of the city team, to engage the experts like you just heard from. But no more process. After Tuesday, let's go. We are putting together more than enough tools for our city to get at this, to help thousands, to attain a cleaner and safer city, and to show people that unending homelessness does not have to be hopelessness. That's not the way it has to be. Thank you. Let's open it up for questions.
So the way this is gonna work is we have a number of people online that have
Yes,
questions to
okay.
report. So we're gonna rotate, like one person in person asks a question, and Andrew will introduce someone online to ask a question. We'll rotate.
Mayor, what's your timeline on this pending Tuesday's approval?
What's the timeline post Tuesday? So the funding plan, we have 2 years worth of funding. So we have, that's what HAP 3 provides. That's what the American Relief Plan provides. But my timeline is not 2 years. I want to see as many of these 20 publicly controlled sites up and running within a couple months. It has to be. And again, the devil is in the implementation. It really is. The devil is in the implementation. But I think we're slowly, maybe more than slowly, changing that devil from an angel, because the implementation needs to be, this is a state of emergency. I always talk about when there's a public safety crisis, cities are used to invoking the Emergency Operations Center, where everyone from law enforcement, they get together and they've got a protocol and it's all hands on deck. That's what we need here. We need our own version of an Emergency Operations Center when it comes to implementation. And I know, got a great city manager. We're talking a lot about this, and he will be part of the presentation next Tuesday and the Tuesday after, because it's about implementation.
To that,
Yeah.
you spoke about a large campus as well.
I
talking
did.
with the county. What's the timeline on that?
Well, so this one, again, some things are within your control and some things are out, but we are pretty close to being able to publicly identify a site. I will say that. Once we do that, we've been privileged to have the leadership, for example, of Dr. David Lubarsky, who is the dean at UCD Medical Center. UC Davis has expressed a real interest in helping lead on a campus kind of facility. Our job has been to try to get a site, and we're getting closer.
Hi, Mayor Steinberg. Sarah here. Just a quick question. Just looking at the siting map, I was wondering, how were the locations of these priority sites determined? Since when you look at it, it looks like there's a bit of an unequal distribution, especially when you look at like District 1, which doesn't seem to have any sites, or District 5, I think, has like a very small number of priority sites. How did you guys determine?
Well, first of all, remember there are 2 parts to this plan, and they're equally important. Number 1 are the new sites. The 3 parts. Number 1 are the new sites. Number 2 are the existing new sites. For example, in District 5, you've got the WX shelter that is going up. Hopefully it's going to open in September. So that's not a new site, but it's a project that we have been working on and funded, Jay Chenier, over the last, however long it's taken, 18 months, but now it's going to actually be up. So that counts too. So you can't just look at the 20 sites. You have to also look at the new projects, which is its own category. The motel conversions, where the report indicates, for example, that we can't name the sites, but we have prospective sites in District 1 and in District 3. And so is this a perfect, evenly distributed, fair share plan among all 8 districts in the city? No, it is not. But there's that old cliche, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I would amend that a little bit and say, never let the perfect be the enemy of the great. Because this is big and bold. And yes, it's not perfect in terms of its distribution throughout the city. But I think you have to look beyond just the 20 sites. You have to look at the tiers 2 sites, but more importantly, look at the at that second category of already approved new sites. And then the programmatic side, which includes motel conversions and some of the other programs, every district in this city will be represented in this plan.
And I mean, just a quick follow-up, it does look like, you know, the city's wealthiest and whitest districts typically don't have as much planning or space for housing homelessness or homeless people as some of the neighborhoods that have higher communities of color typically are more underserved. Is this a concern for you?
It's always a concern for me, absolutely. And the fair share, I hold very dear the fair share principle. And, you know, we have worked with every district council member, every part of the city, everybody participated. But I knew from the very beginning that if I insisted on some sort of a proportional plan, exactly by district, that we would be arguing about and debating this for another 12 months. And the problem would then get worse. So I'm not going to make the perfect the enemy of the great. And it is of concern to me. We're going to continue to push. And by the way, this plan will evolve. Look at the tier 2 sites. There can be tier 3 sites. Part of where we started with these new sites, of course, is to assess where the vacant land is. Where the vacant land is that is owned by the city, by the reclamation district, or by regional transit or Caltrans. And by the way, the Caltrans sites that are listed on this report, they're not prospective sites. We have worked this out with Caltrans. The state has been great. Thank you to Governor Newsom. Thank you to Caltrans Director Tokes Amashakin and his team, because those Caltrans sites have been locked down here. The RT sites, the RT board had a major meeting a week and a half or so ago. They still have to approve those sites, but the momentum is there, and there's a lot of push and support behind it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, just one more question to confirm. So it looks like District 1 does not have any sites right now, but you said that it will have some potential motel conversions.
District 1 is committed to at least one motel conversion and to be a lead in the scattered site approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, those of us who've talked with a lot of homeless people over the years have that they distrust government. They're not going to go to any kind of shelter, no matter how pretty it looks, because they don't like the authoritarian, what they perceive as authoritarian way that they're run. And so tell us how you're going to change that. How do you get those people into shelters, and how does the court rulings
Sure.
well feed into them in terms of the city forcing them to go to shelter?
So I start from this perspective, and it's rooted in my life, my career-long work around mental health. Prop 63 generates $2.5 billion a year, and it's a voluntary mental health services initiative. That's what it is. And what we know is that when you have the right kind of outreach and you build trust with people who have lived through trauma and who are distrustful, that more people than not will in fact go in. So I do think there's always some truth to a myth, but I think it's an overstated issue that people won't come inside. People won't come inside because we don't meet them where they're at. That's one thing. Number two, I have put out another proposal, which is not part of next Tuesday because I have to take one big chunk before I can get to the next one, where I've called for a right to housing, a legal right to housing in Sacramento, and a legal obligation to take it if it is offered. And I intend to pursue that as soon as we're done with this. I do believe the public policy of this society and this city should be people live indoors. And it starts with the government, it starts with the government's obligation, and ultimately the individual has an obligation to come indoors if they are presented safe and dignified alternatives. And one of the things that's so important about what Bob, John, and Steve presented here is that most of the distrust that I hear of is people don't want to always live in congregate shelters. Some people do. But the beauty of the tiny home movement, which I think it should be a movement here, is that it also allows for autonomy for people. It allows for autonomy. And so, again, perfection, sure, no. Can we get thousands of people to say yes? Absolutely.
All right, next up I have Tony from the Sac Observer.
Hi, Tony.
Hello, Mayor. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
Great, great, great. You know, and you just touched on it. I was going in that direction. I do remember during your first campaign, you addressed the issue of having the unhoused living indoors. You know, as they say, you know, the longest journey start with the first step. Does this kind of accomplish your vision 4 or 5 years ago? You know, going into these things of making sure that everyone have favorable living arrangements with this plan?
I believe that this is a unique and bold approach. As I said a moment ago, the implementation of this strategy is every bit as important, if not more important, than the plan itself. Because we have got to act as an entire city as if this is a true state of emergency. This is a tool. Nobody can say after next Tuesday that, well, we don't have sites. We don't have sites. It's going to take too long to approve the sites. Oh, we don't have the money. Oh, we don't know how to put the money together with the sites. Oh, we don't have the right kind of architecture to show how it can be done. We have all of it. And there will be challenges in implementation, but I want the mindset of this city to be that we are going to treat this like a state of emergency. And we are going to implement this. There is no reason why the 20 sites contained with the 20 new sites contained within this siting plan cannot be up and running in some form within months. And that certainly will be a test. And, you know, but I can only do, well, I'm not going to say, I'm responsible. So I'm not just going to say, well, I can only do it. I'm responsible ultimately for the success of all of this. I believe that we collectively are presenting a unique opportunity here. So let's get after it and let's make it better.
And I do have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. You did say about good neighbors. Well, you do have a lot of, you know, ground roots organization around town. The City of Refuge, Rolanda Wilkins, a nonprofit, the City of the Rose Center, et cetera, et cetera. How can they be a part of this grand master plan of creating these type of communities? Because as well as, you know, the Sacramento chapter of the Poor People's Campaign that did a lot of work with these unhoused people. How can they be involved with these communities that you want to build?
I'm sorry. We need the advocates here. I know sometimes we may have some disagreements, but I have the greatest respect for the people like Brother Carter and others who are out on the streets actually working with people. I do, and we need them. And I think this presents the advocates an opportunity to seek relief for the people they are serving like never before. Because it's always been, well, where are people going to go? What are the options? We're seeking to provide those options. That's what this is all about. I've always said, you know, the question of enforcement and regulation always comes up. And I'm clear, right to housing, obligation to take it. I believe that that clean and safe is not the opposite of helping people. They go together. I believe that it is appropriate for the city to say, at some point, there are places where it is appropriate to live and there's places where it's not appropriate to live. But we have not had the legal or the moral high ground to even ask that question. because we have not, in an organized way, provided the citywide capacity. Implementation of this plan will allow us to provide capacity for almost 10,000 people. Then we can have a conversation about where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate for people to live and or to camp.
Mayor, I have two questions. The first is, we see people living under our freeways, next to our freeways right now. How is the city, once approved, going to encourage our unhoused community to get into those sites?
One of the important elements of implementation, in my view, is going to be consolidating all of the different outreach strategies and case management strategies that we have going on in the city. Bridget Dean is a remarkable new leader in this city who is building up this city Department of Community Response that is going to be responsible for the outreach. But here's what I know. I know in talking to the Midtown Business Association that they employ 17 outreach workers, 17 outreach workers. Well, those 17 outreach workers and the many dozens of other outreach workers that are working for various business associations or nonprofits need to be brought under one umbrella, trained, all trained, how to intervene and help people and navigate people into one of these sites. And we need to have hundreds of people that are trained, that are out there intervening to navigate people into these sites. That's an essential part of this. It cannot just be a city department. That's a mistake. So we say, and I have greatest regard for Bridget, but I've been saying this all around City Hall. You can't get into this thing where, oh, okay, now Bridget's going to implement this. Bridget's the leader. But this is a matter of taking all the resources that we have, not just public resource, but some of the business resources we have. 17 outreach workers with the Midtown Business Association. They need to be trained, and they need to be working. They need to be working with collaboratively with all the other teams in our city so that we are flooding the zone with trained people to do this intervention. It's all about implementation.
When you talk about this large campus, essentially, this would be a one-stop shop where people can get services they need for medical as well as housing.
Exactly.
And childcare. I automatically think of a facility in Texas, in San Antonio specifically, called Haven for Hope. It's a large facility that literally provides everything for the community.
So Haven for Hope is one model. I know the advocates don't necessarily love Haven for Hope. They point to other models. So I don't want to point to one model, but it's the same idea.
Right.
It's a campus where we can help the people who are the most chronically ill and provide them with what they need to help them have a better life. That's what all this is about. I mean, think about this. Why have we accepted this? Why have we tacitly accepted this in our society? That's why I called for a right to housing and an obligation to take it if offered. Because the public policy of this city, of this state, of this society is that, well, everything we do here is voluntary. This is a voluntary act. It's a bold act, but it's a voluntary act. I think the law should be different. People should live indoors. I think government should guarantee a right to housing. That's what I think. But until we get there, we're going to forge forward as if we had a right to housing and try to provide the beds, the roofs, and the spaces that good and great people like this, Steve Waters, need in order to bring to scale what they know works. One or two more?
Chris Hooks from Cap Radio.
Mike? Oh,
Hi, Mayor. Hey, Mayor, thank you. So you mentioned working with advocates. One thing that advocates tell journalists often is that a lot of these sites don't have accessibility for homeless residents in Sacramento. Looking at the master siting plan, I don't see much in regards to transportation. Can you speak to specifics on transportation and how this would work in getting some homeless folks where they need to be or where they would want to be, I should say?
I'm sorry, Chris. Yes. Well, first of all, I think one of the underlying principles here of the plan and the sites is that we're going to bring the services to the sites and to the people. This is not well, this is your place to sleep. Here's a bus voucher. Go figure it out. Just the opposite. This is why the relationship again with the county is so important, whereas it's, we're working really well together. But if we do the operations and we partner with them on the on the social workers, on the mental health, on the substance use piece of this, then we're bringing the services to the people. Now, and ultimately, you're right. I think we're going to need to involve regional transit, for example, in more than just, they've been great, by the way. Henry Lee, I want to thank him for putting forward and being willing to talk about a number of these RT parking lots. It's been a huge part of this. But ultimately, we're going to probably need to expand that relationship so that we're providing transportation to people who get the employment skills that they've been lacking and get a job and are able to go to work even as they're moving through the so-called continuum of care and finding a permanent place to live. But the idea here is we've got to bring these need to be triage centers. This is not just shelter. Everything has got to be triage on site.
Let's say two more.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Mike.
Have you factored in or made a plan of contingency for security, both for people with at ease, people who live in the community, but also for the homeless people who themselves move around often because of victimization?
I'm glad you asked that question. First of all, good neighbor policy includes security, and it'll be site specific and program specific, but absolutely where it's appropriate and necessary, security needs to be a big part of this. But there's not a but to that. It's just the and. The victimization issue, which is just so horrific. You think about women on the street, victims of assault, sexual assault. You think about the way people are preyed on. You think about the drug trade, all of it. That's why doing this is so essential. Because if we don't take this kind of approach, the status quo means that people continue to be victimized in the most unacceptable ways. And so if you bring people into a more organized setting, whatever it is, and you saw what it should and could look like, we have a much better chance not only to provide safety and security to people who have been victimized, but also to provide them with the help and the services they need to get out of this terrible living situation. Security, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have Karma online.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Going back to the plans legislation requiring people to take the housing if it's offered, you just talked about not having a place to come from, a moral high ground to mandate that. So in terms of a timeline of seeing what exactly the details of that law would look like, do you plan to wait until the full housing plan is implemented, or how could we see that?
I'm sorry. No, we're working on that. We're walking and chewing gum at the same time here. We're working on the ordinance. I've been meeting with the city attorney. I hope that we can have a draft out publicly sometime next month. That's my goal. Because no, I'm centered a speech on this state of Sacramento, this master plan and on the right to housing, and I'm following through, probably next month.
And further along those lines with regards to the housing, I know you've expressed a reluctance to see a sort of a forceful enforcement of that. So given that you need people to take the housing and don't want any confrontational enforcement, it seems like the path of would be people would see an option that works for them and decide to take it. And talking with many unhoused people and many advocates for the unhoused, feedback I continue to hear is that people would be open to taking housing as long as they don't have to live with other people. The congregate settings, I heard a lot of reluctance to that. So I guess my question is, for the plan that you've set out, how much of this have unhoused people been able to lay eyes on, give feedback on, and how will they factor into this process of planning and saying, yeah, this is something we would take, or no, we wouldn't take it?
Well, first of all, I have met with the advocate leadership in this very room a week or so ago. We'll continue to do so. I think maybe this is a follow-up where we'll get a little bit more detail, but I can say confidently that the vast majority of sites and spaces and roofs represented in this plan are not congregate shelter. They would provide autonomy to people. Think about Project Home Key. We're talking about motel rooms. I mean, nothing's perfect, but that's autonomy. The tiny homes, even the mini sprung tents that the ULI and AI just presented to us, that represents autonomy. That isn't congregate shelter. Now, there is a place for congregate shelter. We're doing it at Meadowview, and it's working very well, by the way. And we're about to open the sprung shelter at WX in Alhambra. But that isn't this is not a congregate shelter plan. It's not what this is. The majority of it represents autonomy for people. So I think when people digest this, we implement it, we begin really working with the models that Bob and John and Steve brought forward here, that people are going to see and say, these are much better options for people. I don't say that the right to housing, the obligation to housing should be, all right, you take this spot in the congregate shelter and that's all. That's not what this is. Multiple options, safe and dignified options for people, autonomy for people. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
One more.
One more real quick. Are you gonna create practically an unhoused department?
It's going to take a small army. We have a new Department of Community Response, but to me, it's not about creating a new department. It is about all parts of the city. Again, this is not handing this off to one person and saying, go. All parts of the city have got to be on board as if this was, because it is, a real state of emergency. I want to talk beginning August 10th, but post August 10th, publicly about what it is going to take to implement this with the level of urgency that the people out on the streets deserve, that our business corridors and our neighborhoods, our entire city deserves. Thanks again for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. Look forward to